you, Michael. Oh, I actually had I should briefly introduce myself, and I'm sorry that I expected a 16 to 9 format, so this is why it's a bit small. So I'm from ETAS, KIT, and I actually had a very hard time holding back my questions because I have questions directly to you, but I will incorporate that in my talk. So we'll see. So as you can see, I'm talking about Twitter. I want to give you a brief overview. First, I want to talk a little bit about why I think Twitter is something interesting to talk about. Also, wondering about, is it just a hype, as was suggested earlier, also in context of metrics. Then I want to talk about concrete examples of Twitter in the context of technology assessment. Also about first-hand experiences, because I was part of the team setting up ETA's Twitter account, and then wondering how can Twitter be an e-infrastructure for TA, but also thinking a bit ahead in a bit larger way, wondering about the long-term challenges of web platforms. So let's get right into it. I don't have much time, so I will cut this short. I just assume you all know Twitter, and you know I don't have to explain you how it works and so on. I think the crucial point of Twitter, why it's interesting, is that it's a very powerful networking tool, and that it's able to, with Twitter, to bypass the former gatekeepers and to have a direct one-to-many communication. This is of course not unique to Twitter, but a general social media thing. But I'll get into it why Twitter is interesting in a second. So I'll just skip these examples and because of the limited time, go a bit more into the detail. So is Twitter really that important? Because in the other slide I showed, for example, the 4 more years example of Obama, which used to be the most retweeted tweet on Twitter ever. But as some pointed out, this is actually nothing compared to Facebook, because on Twitter, I'm sorry, it's probably hardly readable, it got 750,000 roughly retweets, while on Facebook it got over 4 million likes. So is Twitter really such an important platform, you may wonder? Also content-wise, isn't much of what we see just entertainment stuff, and is it really interesting for in a professional context? Also, as this nice picture says, the revolution will not be tweeted, so pointing out what is actually the democratic potential and the actual societal impact of Twitter. But to put this also into context, we have to consider the regional differences, and sorry again that it's so small. What you can see, or not see, up there, so you see the Twitter penetration in selected countries. And up there is Saudi Arabia and a few other Arab nations which have a very strong penetration of Twitter, where the majority of people, at least from the people who are online, actually use Twitter, versus developing countries like Germany down there, which have very little Twitter usage. So this is something to consider if you think about Twitter, and also who uses Twitter in this general context. For example, it's interesting that journalists, for example, find it very important. As you can see here, this was a US journalist who point out which social media channels they use regularly, and the clear winner here is Microblogging, which mainly means Twitter, because this is the most important microblogging platform. So also there is a, let's say, significant minority of academics using Twitter. There are different statistics on that. I pointed out conveniently 2 studies because they have the same number. They came to 10% of academics use Twitter. You can say a bit more, a bit less, depending on the exact study, but I guess that's about what we have currently. But let's get a bit more into our field in TA. So there are a number of TA institutions already represented on Twitter. Rathenau Institute is the most prominent one in terms of followers, because they have over 4,000 followers now. As I said, Ida has just recently had created an account in 2013. ITA is a bit longer on board already, and there are many more. TA Swiss just created one, as I saw earlier. We're trying to keep track of that. There's a list made by ITA, one by Antonio Moniz, and I actually set up as the last link a collaborative list where everyone can also add new institutions. So this is my attempt to open that list keeping up to everyone, so everyone can just add their institution there. Okay, so let's talk a bit about what people actually do on Twitter, what do institutions do there. So mostly what we can observe is public relations, so the institutions promote their own activities, like they're referring to conferences and publications and media coverage about their institutes. Some networking in terms of interaction with researchers, experts and the general public, and also we can see less by institutions but more by individuals actually live tweeting, as we have now when you look at the hashtag Pasita15 right now. And now it gets interesting to me when I listen to your talk, because I had since Rathenau is the most prominent voice on Twitter in the field of TA, I interviewed Marlies Hannefer from Rathenau and asked her, hey, can you point out some interesting examples of Twitter usage? And she referred actually to the project that you talked about, which is Patience No Matter, where actually I don't need to introduce it now since you did that already. But what's interesting is that you did not mention Twitter, which Marlies pointed out as an important tool. So she said that Rathenau sent out emails to influential online networks who then tweeted about it. And according to her, this way a broad audience could be reached and the project received the desired report that you talked about.
So when we organized the debate, because that was after the report was finished and a lot of people on Twitter talked about it. Okay. And we invited everyone on Twitter who talked about it to our debate, and then there was also more talk on Twitter surrounding this debate.
So a different stage because you put it in the impact session, as I saw. Okay, thanks for putting that into context. Good. And another interesting example, I think was can you pronounce Debattvertrauen? So that's another hashtag where you had, it was an active discourse on Twitter about trust in science initiative by Rathenau. And so under this one hashtag then you have debates from very different actors and connected to events, but also publications and so on, all gathered around one hashtag. So this is also where Twitter is very useful. So I think the advantages of Twitter for TA institutions is, well, obviously it's free. It's fast, much faster than sending out your monthly newsletter that no one wants to read really anyway. So obviously it's potentially very powerful for public outreach, also especially in regard to certain target groups, as I said earlier, that journalists, for example, use Twitter quite a bit. Yeah, it's also interesting to interact with potentially also new audience from all kinds of fields. But enough of Twitter propaganda, let's point out some challenges that are obviously also there. Some first-hand experiences when we set up our Twitter account. So first step is convincing the colleagues, because not everyone is a heavy Twitter user, and so you first have to do some propaganda, as I just did, about why it is useful and an interesting tool. You also might have to get the approval of higher authorities. In our case, it was the KIT as an institution, and get familiar with the social media guidelines if you have that. Of course, you have to adapt to the very specific Twitter format, which already starts with finding an account name. When your name is Institute for Technology Assessment and System Analysis, this becomes very difficult. Yeah, the whole communicating Twitter style, 140 characters, using hashtags and all that, you have to get used to. But also the question who tweets and what and how as well as how to interact actually with the audience becomes actually very difficult when you look into the details. So some challenges here, if it's a team of multiple authors, should you identify everyone individually with initials, for example? You have to wonder what is actually appropriate content for this kind of format. How can it internally reach the Twitter team responsible for it? So this is a bit difficult because it challenges the regular routines for public outreach in the institution, because Twitter is just very fast and has a short format. Of course, a crucial Twitter question: how do you get followers? Also, do you follow them back? It's not that easy to handle. And how do you quickly respond to questions and criticism? And I have a little example for you how it is if you have such a channel which puts you very much out there and it's out of your control what kind of questions. And this is not too bad as an example, but just I thought it's interesting how these information flows go. The KRT actually tweeted about our conference here. Sorry, this is in German, but I just explained. They tweeted about this conference there, and then someone said, hey, do you actually record the talks? Yes, we do, thank you. As I know now, that every talk is actually recorded. So KRT asked them, no, we don't know that. Maybe ETAS can, someone from the ETAS team can tell us. And one guy said, okay, we can, I will at least tweet a little bit about it. And later we then reacted and said, thank you for your interest. At least the keynotes will be streamed. And then he says, okay, thank you. This is just an example of how it's, once you put it out there, you always are also forced to react and interact. It just happens, you know. Okay, so Twitter is an e-infrastructure for TA, yes or no, to tweet or not to tweet, that is a question. So yes, as obviously Twitter can be a free and powerful, useful tool for public outreach, but it takes time and effort to build an audience. Its format, openness, and pace challenges the established routines. And a crucial argument I would make is we are represented on Twitter whether we like it or not. If you just take the example that I just presented, if we weren't on Twitter, then it would get very complicated. They would have to write an email to us and all, and asking, then we have to get back, and that takes much longer. So I think it's better to then actively shape our online presence than rely on others doing it. But related to that, if we think long term, there are actually much bigger questions out there, bigger than Twitter, bigger than TA. And nevertheless very important and also practically something we need to think about. So I think essentially social media platforms now work like honeypots. It's easy to get in, but rather difficult to get out. So what I mean is, Michael Nedvig and I have tried to coin that the beta society. I can't get into that in detail, but very briefly, I want to point it out what we mean. So the different aspects of the beta society. One is instability, meaning once you get into these platforms, you always have to face constant changes. These develops all these platforms are all, in a sense, in a constant beta state because they're never really ready. They're always changing, so you always have to adapt to these changes and what's happening there. Doing that, you're completely dependent on the platform developers' decisions. They develop, not you, and usually they, as we all know very well, especially from Facebook, they don't care too much about our personal opinions. So we're completely dependent on the developers' choices there. There's also lacking accountability. Usually when something doesn't work, you find in the terms of use, well, if it doesn't work, it's your problem, basically. It's a take it or leave it attitude. There's no, there's no legal liability there. Also, when it comes to individuals, so let's say someone writes bad things about you on Twitter anonymously. There's mostly not much you can do quickly about it. As I try to point out with this honeypot metaphor, what we see there is low barriers and hidden costs. So it's very easy to get in. They make it very user-friendly, and you think, well, it's great, it's powerful, let's do that. and later you realize what are actually the hidden costs. Usually they're hidden in the terms of service, as this great initiative has pointed out. I have read and agree to the terms is the biggest lie on the web. I tend to agree with that, and I can also undermine that with a nice little study made by McDonald and Craner. They said they estimated that an average user would have to spend 40 minutes per day only with reading terms of service. And that's an interesting part. That was in 2008, so before we had a wide acceptance of smartphones and all these apps. So I assume now it's more like several hours per day. So that's something to think about, actually. And I don't have final answers to that. I would like to leave that to the discussion. What's your opinion on these problems that I pointed out? And I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, René. This leaves us with some time for discussion. Who wants to react first on this? Maybe provoking? Please.
Thank you. It's a very interesting topic. You mentioned public outreach several times. I was wondering, and you also pointed out that how to get followed and who to follow is a big challenge when it comes to set up a tweet team within an institution. I was wondering who is this public, who you refer to, and whether Twitter actually allows the TA institution to know who they are being followed and how much impact they are having on those they follow.
Yeah. Okay. So the question: who you can reach?
The public.
Who is the public? That's what I try to point out with this slide, pointing out that the public is very different according to the region you're addressing. So, for example, in this case, in Saudi Arabia, you basically can reach almost everyone with Twitter, potentially at least. And versus in Germany, here it says actually 90%. It's actually even smaller because this is the online. Only the people who are actually online. According to another study, it's 2% on Twitter in Germany. I think in the Netherlands much higher. I don't have the concrete number, only what's pointed out here. There it says 31. Yeah. So yeah, again, so it depends very much on where you are, what kind of audience you reach, and of course when you talk about cases like Germany is a very specific audience. Internet savvy people, people whose profession is information, like journalists. So if you want to use it then for a tool, like for example in your case, for that kind of debate, then it becomes very tricky if you use it in Germany as a public outreach tool, because you only will get this very tech savvy audience, for example. So it depends a bit, yeah.